It was just another routine day at the bustling city airport. Jenna Walker, a diligent flight attendant, prided herself on being meticulous when it came to enforcing the airline's strict boarding policies. She believed that rules existed for a reason, and it was her job to make sure everyone followed them. After all, airports were chaotic enough without passengers trying to bend the rules to suit their own needs. Jenna had worked at the airline for 6 years, and in that time, she had seen it all. From movie stars insisting they shouldn't have to wait in line to frazzled parents trying to sneak oversized bags onto the plane, Jenna thought she was prepared for anything. She'd learned to handle the entitled business executives who demanded upgrades with a calm but firm demeanor, and she had a knack for defusing tension with frustrated travelers. She believed in being polite but resolute, even when passengers pushed her limits. Still, there was a part of Jenna that wondered if anyone really appreciated her efforts. To many passengers, she was just another gate agent, a nameless face in a uniform telling them what they couldn't do. She was used to eye rolls, curt remarks, and the occasional outburst. But Jenna never let it shake her. She had a job to do, and she was determined to do it well. Today, the terminal was alive with the familiar hum of activity. Suitcases rumbled across the polished floors, the loudspeaker blared boarding announcements, and travelers scurried toward their gates. It was just another day in Jenna's world. Or so she thought. By noon, Jenna was stationed at gate 32, scanning boarding passes and answering last-minute questions from passengers. The flight to Los Angeles was nearly full, and the priority boarding group had just been called. The boarding line was orderly for now, and Jenna intended to keep it that way. She glanced at her watch. Right on schedule. Jenna allowed herself a small moment of satisfaction. Keeping everything running smoothly gave her a sense of control in a job where surprises were constant. But her calm was about to be disrupted. Out of the corner of her eye, Jenna noticed a man approaching the gate. He didn't stand out in the way some passengers did. There was no tailored suit, no designer luggage, no air of self-importance. He was dressed casually in faded jeans, a plain hoodie, and sneakers that looked like they had seen better days. His relaxed stride suggested he wasn't in a rush, but there was something about his presence that drew Jenna's attention. He didn't look like he belonged in the priority line, yet he was headed straight for it. Jenna immediately braced herself. This wasn't unusual. People often tried to board before their group was called, either out of confusion or because they hoped no one would notice. Jenna prided herself on catching those attempts, and she was ready to intercept this one. As he reached the gate, Jenna stepped forward with a polite but firm smile. "Good afternoon, sir. May I see your boarding pass?" The man stopped and looked at her, his expression calm but unreadable. He pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket and handed it to her without a word. Jenna unfolded it and scanned the details. Sure enough, he wasn't in the priority group. "I'm sorry, but it looks like your boarding group hasn't been called yet," Jenna said, keeping her tone professional. "You'll need to wait until Group 3 is announced." The man gave her a small, almost amused smile. "I just need to get on this flight," he said simply. His voice was steady, not demanding or rude, but there was a quiet confidence in his tone that caught Jenna off guard. "I understand," Jenna replied, maintaining her composure. "But we have a process, and we need to follow it. Please step aside for now so the priority passengers can board." Jenna half expected him to argue, as many passengers did when they were told to wait. But the man didn't argue. He didn't huff or roll his eyes. He simply nodded and stepped aside, his hands tucked casually into his hoodie pockets. Still, Jenna couldn't shake the feeling that there was something unusual about him. It wasn't just his calm reaction, it was the way he carried himself. He didn't seem embarrassed or annoyed, just composed. As if being told to wait wasn't an inconvenience but a minor detail in a much larger picture. She watched as he leaned against a nearby pillar, his gaze wandering across the terminal. Passengers continued to stream past him, completely unaware of his presence. To everyone else, he was just another traveler. But for reasons Jenna couldn't quite explain, she felt like there was more to him than met the eye. Shaking off her curiosity, Jenna refocused on her task. The priority passengers were boarding smoothly, and the line was moving steadily. She reminded herself that the man was probably just an ordinary traveler who didn't want to miss his flight. There was no reason to dwell on him. And yet, as the minutes ticked by, Jenna found her eyes drifting back to him. Something about his calm demeanor seemed almost too deliberate. It was as if he knew something no one else did. But what could it be? Little did she know, this man wasn't just anyone. As the boarding process continued, Jenna forced herself to focus. She had seen all kinds of passengers with all kinds of quirks, and it wasn't her job to unravel their mysteries. Her job was to ensure everyone boarded safely, followed the rules, and reached their destinations without a hitch. Still, something about this man lingered in the back of her mind like a faint but persistent melody she couldn't place. The priority group finished boarding, and Jenna moved on to group 1. Her motions were automatic: scan, smile, repeat. Occasionally, a passenger would fumble for their boarding pass, or a child would tug on a parent's sleeve, but everything was proceeding smoothly. The earlier interaction with the casually dressed man had been unusual, yes, but hardly remarkable. She reassured herself there was nothing more to it. But then, as she glanced back toward the waiting area, she saw him again. He was still leaning against the pillar, now typing something on his phone. He didn't seem impatient. In fact, he looked completely at ease, as though he had all the time in the world. His nonchalant behavior was a stark contrast to the usual flurry of anxious travelers milling about the terminal. Jenna found herself wondering, who was he texting? Was he rearranging plans, preparing for a delay? Or was he someone so accustomed to waiting that even a slight inconvenience didn't faze him? Most passengers, even seasoned travelers, displayed at least a hint of frustration when told they couldn't board yet. But not him. He seemed immune to the stresses of airport life, and it was starting to gnaw at Jenna's curiosity. The voice of her colleague, Monica, pulled her back to the moment. "Hey, Jenna, everything good over here?" Jenna nodded, her professional smile slipping back into place. "Yep, all good. Group 1 is just about finished." Monica glanced toward the waiting area, following Jenna's earlier gaze. "Oh, that guy over there? Did he give you trouble?" Jenna shook her head. "No, he was fine. Just tried to board early, but he didn't argue when I asked him to wait." Monica raised an eyebrow. "Really? That's rare. Most people act like it's the end of the world if they don't get on the plane first." "I know," Jenna said, her voice lowering slightly. "That's what's weird about him. He didn't argue, didn't even seem annoyed. It's like he didn't care at all." Monica smirked. "Maybe he's one of those Zen types. You know, the kind who does yoga and meditates instead of checking their emails." "Maybe," Jenna replied, though she wasn't convinced. There was something about the man that didn't fit the mold of any traveler she'd encountered before. By the time Group 2 was called, Jenna had almost managed to push him out of her mind. The boarding process required her full attention now, as passengers started filtering through with a mix of eagerness and exhaustion. She scanned passes, directed people to their seats, and answered the occasional question about overhead bin space or connecting flights. It was a rhythm she knew well, one that gave her a sense of control in an otherwise unpredictable environment. But as Group 3 approached, Jenna spotted movement out of the corner of her eye. The man had stepped away from his spot near the pillar and was now walking back toward the gate. His movements were unhurried, his expression still calm. For a moment, Jenna wondered if he had misheard the announcement and thought his group had been called. She prepared herself to politely redirect him again. When he reached the gate, She met his gaze, her professional demeanor firmly in place. "Group 3 hasn't been called yet, sir," she said, her voice steady but firm. "You'll need to wait just a little longer." The man tilted his head slightly, studying her. There was no hostility in his expression, just an unsettling calm. "I understand," he said, his voice as even as before. "But I really need to get on this flight. It's important." Jenna felt a flicker of frustration. It wasn't the first time someone had claimed their situation was important, and it wouldn't be the last. "I'm sorry, sir, but we have to follow the boarding process. I'll be happy to scan your pass as soon as Group 3 is called." The man didn't argue. Instead, he held her gaze for a moment longer, as though weighing his next words. Finally, he stepped back with a small nod. "Understood," he said, returning to his earlier spot near the pillar. Jenna exhaled, relieved the interaction hadn't escalated. Yet, as she resumed scanning boarding passes, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. He hadn't been rude or pushy, but there was an air of quiet authority about him that made her uneasy. It was as if he knew something she didn't, as if the rules that governed everyone else somehow didn't apply to him. The rest of Group 3 boarded without incident, and Jenna prepared for the final boarding call. By now, the waiting area was nearly empty, save for a few stragglers gathering their belongings. The man by the pillar was one of them, his phone now tucked away in his pocket. As Jenna called for all remaining passengers to board, she saw him approach again, this time with the same steady stride and calm expression. Her pulse quickened slightly, though she wasn't sure why. Something about him made her feel like she was on the verge of discovering a puzzle she hadn't even realized she was trying to solve. "Boarding pass, please," she said, her tone as professional as ever. He handed her the same folded paper, and she scanned it without hesitation. It cleared, as she knew it would. Still, as the man passed through the gate and walked toward the jet bridge, Jenna couldn't help but feel that this wasn't the last time she'd see him. Something about this passenger wasn't ordinary. And though she couldn't explain it, she felt that her day was about to take a turn she never could have predicted. Little did she know, she was absolutely right. "Excuse me, sir," Jenna said, stepping directly in front of the man's path. Her voice was calm but firm, the kind of tone she had mastered over years of handling stubborn travelers. "You're not on the priority boarding list. Please step aside." The man stopped and looked at her, one eyebrow raising slightly as if amused. There was something about his face that tugged at Jenna's memory, but she couldn't quite place it. He didn't seem angry or annoyed, just curious, like someone watching a puzzle come together. After a beat, he said, "I just need to get on this flight. Trust me, it's important." Jenna kept her stance firm, her hands clasped neatly in front of her. She'd heard variations of this line countless times before. Everyone thought their reason for breaking the rules was special. She replied with a practiced politeness. "I'm sure it is, but rules are rules. If you don't have a boarding pass for this section, you'll need to wait for your group to be called." She could hear the soft murmurs of the other passengers behind her. A few chuckles, some barely audible whispers clearly, people were enjoying the sight of someone being put in their place. Jenna could even feel a faint wave of approval from the crowd, an unspoken acknowledgement that she was doing her job well. And she wasn't she? But as she met the man's gaze again, she couldn't shake the odd feeling creeping into her thoughts. His reaction or lack of one was unsettling. Most people in this situation would argue, roll their eyes, or mutter something under their breath. This man, however, did none of that. Instead, he simply stood there, his expression calm, almost serene, as though he wasn't the least bit concerned about being turned away. Jenna took a deep breath. She was determined to stay professional, no matter how peculiar this encounter felt. "Please step aside so we can continue boarding," she repeated, her voice steady. The man gave her a small smile, one that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Of course," he said, taking a step back. "I wouldn't want to hold anyone up." Something about the way he spoke made Jenna pause. His words were polite, but there was a weight to them, a quiet authority that didn't match his casual appearance. He stepped aside as promised, but he didn't go far. Instead, he leaned casually against the nearest pillar, his hands tucked into the pockets of his hoodie, watching the scene unfold with an air of calm detachment. Jenna shook off her unease and turned her attention back to the line of passengers. The boarding process was moving smoothly now, the priority group filing onto the plane without issue. She scanned boarding passes, smiled at travelers, and directed them toward the jet bridge. It was routine, predictable, and exactly the way Jenna liked it. Yet, every time she glanced toward the waiting area, her eyes seemed to find him. The man hadn't moved from his spot by the pillar. He wasn't pacing or fidgeting, as most passengers did when they were anxious or impatient. Instead, he stood perfectly still, his posture relaxed, his gaze steady. It was as if he had all the time in the world, and that unnerved her more than any outburst or complaint ever could. The murmurs among the other passengers had died down, but Jenna could still feel their curious glances. They were watching her, waiting to see how she would handle the situation if the man tried to board again. It wasn't often that gate agents became the center of attention, but Jenna had learned to handle the pressure. She prided herself on being unshakable, no matter the circumstances. Still, something about this man was different. His calm demeanor felt deliberate, like a performance designed to keep people guessing. It made her wonder, was he testing her? Was this some sort of prank, or was there more to him than met the eye? The question swirled in her mind, but she forced herself to focus. She couldn't afford to let her imagination get the better of her. The line continued to move, and Jenna did her best to ignore the man's presence. Group 1 had been called, and passengers were now shuffling forward with their belongings, ready to board. Jenna fell into her rhythm, scanning passes and offering polite instructions. "Welcome aboard. Enjoy your flight. Your seat is to the left, near the front. Have a great trip." For a moment, she almost forgot about the man by the pillar. But then, as the last passenger in Group 1 stepped through the gate, she glanced up and there he was, watching her again. His expression hadn't changed, but his gaze felt sharper now, as if he were studying her, trying to read her thoughts. Jenna straightened her posture and called for Group 2. The next wave of passengers began lining up, and she resumed her work. Yet, no matter how much she tried to focus, she couldn't shake the feeling that the man's calm exterior was hiding something. What it was, she couldn't say, but her instincts told her there was more to the situation than a simple misunderstanding. As Group 2 dwindled and the next group prepared to board, Jenna noticed movement out of the corner of her eye. The man had stepped away from the pillar and was now approaching the gate again. Her pulse quickened, though she wasn't sure why. She had dealt with difficult passengers before. What made this one any different? The man stopped in front of her, his hands still in his pockets. "I'm sorry to bother you again," he said, his tone as calm as ever. "But I really do need to get on this flight. It's important." Jenna felt a flicker of frustration, though she kept her voice steady. "Sir, as I mentioned earlier, we're boarding by groups. If you're not in this group, you'll need to wait until your group is called." He nodded, as if acknowledging her point. "I understand," he said. "But this isn't just about me. There are other people counting on me to be there. If I miss this flight, it's going to cause a lot of problems not just for me, but for them too." His words were calm and measured, but there was a subtle urgency in his tone that gave Jenna pause. She studied him carefully, searching for any hint of deception. But his expression remained steady, his gaze unwavering. He wasn't pleading or making excuses, he was simply stating a fact, and that made her even more uneasy. I'm sorry, she said, her professionalism holding firm. But we have to follow the boarding process. I can't make exceptions, no matter how important your situation might be. The man held her gaze for a moment longer, then nodded again. Fair enough, he said, stepping back once more. I'll wait. He returned to his spot by the pillar, and Jenna exhaled a quiet sigh of relief. The interaction had been brief, but it left her feeling unsettled. There was something about his calm acceptance that didn't feel genuine. Most people would have shown at least a flicker of frustration by now, but not him. It was as if he knew something she didn't, as if the rules that applied to everyone else didn't matter to him. Jenna tried to push the thoughts aside and refocus on her job. She had handled the situation professionally, and that was all that mattered. But as the minutes ticked by and the boarding process continued, she couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't the end of it. Something about this man didn't add up, and she couldn't help but wonder what would happen next. Little did she know, her instincts were about to be proven right. The final call for Group 2 had come and gone, and now Jenna was calling for Group 3. As passengers shuffled forward, she caught herself glancing toward the man by the pillar once more. He was still there, standing as calm as ever, his hands resting in his hoodie pocket. The waiting area around him had emptied considerably, yet he seemed unfazed, as though the passage of time had no bearing on him. She shook her head and turned back to the line. "Welcome aboard," she said, scanning another boarding pass. "Your seat is toward the back. Enjoy your flight." The familiar rhythm of her duties steadied her nerves. This man, whoever he was, couldn't distract her from her job. He was just another passenger, after all. And if he tried to board out of turn again, she'd handle it the way she always did, firmly and professionally. But the feeling wouldn't leave her. There was something different about him, something she couldn't quite put her finger on. He wasn't just calm, he was too calm, too collected, as if he already knew how the day was going to unfold. That quiet confidence, paired with his insistence on getting on the flight, was starting to bother her more than she wanted to admit. Monica, her colleague, walked over to her side as the last passenger in Group 3 boarded. "You okay?" Monica asked, her tone light but curious. "You look like you've seen a ghost." Jenna forced a smile. "I'm fine. Just a weird morning." Monica glanced toward the pillar, where the man was still standing. "That guy again? What's his deal?" "I have no idea," Jenna admitted. "He's tried to board twice already, but he doesn't have priority status. He's polite, though. Too polite, honestly." Monica smirked. "Maybe he's just trying to charm his way onto the plane. You know how some people think a smile can get them anything." Jenna shook her head. "It's not that. He's not charming. I don't know. He's too calm. It's like he's not even worried about being left behind." Monica raised an eyebrow. "Well, he's running out of chances. Group 4's next, and then it's all passengers." Jenna nodded, glancing toward the man again. He was still watching, his expression as unreadable as ever. She turned her attention back to the task at hand, determined not to let him distract her further. When the announcement for Group 4 went out, the remaining passengers began to line up. Jenna scanned their passes with her usual efficiency, directing each traveler toward the jet bridge. As the line dwindled, she couldn't help but notice that the man hadn't moved. He was still leaning against the pillar, his gaze fixed on the gate as if he were waiting for some unspoken signal. Finally, the last call for Group 4 was announced. Jenna took a deep breath, preparing herself for the next interaction. She knew he would approach again, there was no doubt in her mind. Sure enough, as the final passengers filed through the gate, he straightened and began walking toward her. She braced herself, her professional demeanor firmly in place. "Sir," she said as he approached, "we're now boarding all remaining passengers." If you have a valid boarding pass, I'll need to scan it before you can board. He stopped in front of her, pulling the folded slip of paper from his pocket. His movements were deliberate, almost methodical, as if he were taking his time to ensure everything was just so. He handed her the pass, his expression calm and unreadable. Jenna unfolded the pass and scanned it. The machine beeped, the sound confirming that his pass was valid. She glanced at the seat assignment, 12C. Nothing unusual there, it was an economy class seat, just like the majority of passengers on the flight. Yet, as she handed the pass back to him, she couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this man than met the eye. "Thank you," he said, his tone as polite as ever. He stepped toward the jet bridge, but just as he passed her, he paused and looked back. "By the way," he said, his voice low, "I appreciate your professionalism. Not everyone would have handled this as well as you did." Jenna blinked, caught off guard by the unexpected compliment. Before she could respond, he turned and continued down the jet bridge, disappearing from view. She stood there for a moment, her mind racing. What did he mean by that? Why did it feel like there was a deeper meaning behind his words? Monica walked over, her brow furrowed. What was that about? Jenna shook her head. "I don't know. But something about him. I can't put my finger on it. It's like he knows something we don't." Monica shrugged. "Maybe he's just one of those mysterious types who likes to keep people guessing. Either way, he's on the plane now. It's out of our hands." Jenna nodded, but the uneasy feeling in her chest didn't go away. She had done her job, followed the rules, and ensured that every passenger was treated fairly. Yet, something about this man's behavior continued to nag at her. It was as if he had been testing her, waiting to see how far he could push without crossing the line. As the final boarding announcement went out, Jenna tried to push the thoughts aside. There were still tasks to complete before the plane could take off, and she couldn't afford to let one unusual passenger distract her from her responsibilities. But deep down, she knew this wasn't the end of the story. Something about the man in the hoodie felt unfinished, like a chapter waiting to be written. Jenna's thoughts raced as she stared at the man leaning against the wall. Could it really be him? She'd only seen Elon Musk on TV and in the news, but now that her supervisor mentioned it, the resemblance was undeniable. The casual outfit, the calm confidence, the air of someone used to being in control, it all fit. Her stomach tightened. If it really was Elon Musk, she had just denied one of the most influential people in the world access to his flight. And not once, but twice. The gate supervisor, a middle-aged man named Roger, looked equally panicked. "He's one of the most important people alive, Jenna. If he misses this flight, the repercussions," he trailed off, running a hand through his thinning hair. Jenna kept her voice steady, though inside she was unraveling. "I don't care who he is. Rules are rules. He didn't follow the boarding process." Roger's eyes widened. "You're kidding, right? Do you know what kind of connections he has? What kind of power he wields? This isn't just some celebrity throwing a tantrum about their seat. If he says he needs to be on this flight, there's probably a very good reason." Jenna hesitated. She prided herself on being professional, on treating all passengers equally. But this was different, wasn't it? She glanced toward the jet bridge, where the last few passengers were filing onto the plane. Time was running out. Roger leaned closer, lowering his voice. "We can't afford a scene, Jenna. Just let him board. Smooth things over." Before she could respond, a voice interrupted them. It was calm, yet carried a weight of authority. "Is there a problem?" Jenna turned to see Elon, or rather, the man who might be Elon, standing just a few feet away. He had his hands in his pockets, his expression neutral but alert. There was no hint of arrogance, no demand for special treatment. If anything, he looked slightly amused by the situation. Roger's face turned beet red. "No problem at all, sir. We were just resolving a small misunderstanding." Elon tilted his head, his gaze shifting to Jenna. "Miss Walker, wasn't it?" The sound of her name startled her. "Yes," she said, her voice quieter than she intended. He smiled faintly. "I appreciate your dedication to the rules. It's rare these days." Jenna wasn't sure if it was a compliment or a veiled jab, but before she could respond, Roger jumped in. "Of course, sir. Jenna here is one of our best employees. Now, let me personally escort you to your seat." Elon held up a hand, cutting Roger off mid-sentence. "No need. I'll wait my turn like everyone else." The statement hung in the air, and for a moment, nobody moved. Jenna felt a mix of relief and guilt. Relief that he wasn't demanding special treatment, and guilt because she suspected she might have made a mistake by treating him like just another passenger. But wasn't that the point? No one should be above the rules, no matter who they were. Roger stammered. Of course, sir. But if there's anything you need." "I'll be fine," Elon said, his tone dismissive. He turned to Jenna, his expression softening slightly. "Good job, by the way. Most people wouldn't have the courage to stand their ground." Jenna's cheeks flushed, and before she could think of a response, Elon walked past her and onto the plane, his boarding pass already scanned. Roger exhaled loudly. That could have gone a lot worse. Jenna didn't reply. Her mind was racing with questions. Why had he been so calm? Why hadn't he pushed harder to get his way? And why had he gone out of his way to compliment her, despite the inconvenience she had caused him? The flight was ready to depart, and Jenna hurried to finish her tasks. But even as she double-checked the final boarding count and confirmed the gate was clear, her thoughts kept returning to Elon Musk. As the plane taxied to the runway, Jenna returned to the gate agent station to finish her post-boarding responsibilities. She was about to file the final paperwork when a notification popped up on her screen. It was from the flight crew, marked as urgent. "Passenger 12C has requested to speak with the pilot upon arrival." Jenna frowned. Passengers rarely made such requests, and when they did, it was usually for trivial reasons. But something told her this wasn't trivial. She couldn't shake the image of Elon Musk leaning against the wall, his calm demeanor masking what she now realized was a mind that never stopped working. Her radio crackled to life. "Jenna, this is Monica. You're not going to believe this, but guess who just got bumped up to first class mid-flight?" "Elon Musk," Jenna said automatically. Monica laughed. "Exactly. Apparently, the flight crew figured out who he was and decided to make things right. He's sitting in 1A now, drinking sparkling water like a king." Jenna sighed. "Makes sense, I guess. You okay?" Monica asked. "You sound off." "I'm fine," Jenna said, though she wasn't sure it was true. "Just a weird day." Meanwhile, aboard the plane, Elon sat in his new seat, his expression thoughtful as he sipped his drink. He had every reason to be annoyed by the morning's events, but instead, he found himself intrigued. The gate agent, Jenna, had shown a level of professionalism and integrity that was rare in his world. Most people bent the rules the moment they realized who he was. But not her. She had held her ground, even when faced with what must have felt like overwhelming pressure. He glanced at the tablet in his lap, where he was reviewing notes for an upcoming meeting. The flight wasn't just important, it was crucial. Missing it would have caused a cascade of delays, affecting not just him but entire teams of engineers, executives, and investors. And yet, as frustrating as the morning had been, he couldn't help but admire how Jenna had handled the situation. She had treated him like everyone else, and in a strange way, he respected her for it. Jenna couldn't help but replay the events in her mind. Elon Musk. She had just brushed off one of the most influential people in the world. At first, it had felt like nothing more than an odd inconvenience, someone trying to sneak in at the last moment. But now, knowing who he was, the weight of what she had done seemed overwhelming. Still, there was a small part of her that held onto her integrity. Rules were rules, and if she hadn't enforced them, she might have set a dangerous precedent. No one was above them. Not even Elon Musk. But then, why had he reacted the way he did? Calm. Polite. Even appreciative. It was as though he was testing her, or maybe it was just his nature. But her intuition told her there was more to the story. After all, people like him didn't just show up in the back of the boarding line without a purpose. For the rest of the day, Jenna couldn't focus on much else. As she helped passengers with final boarding checks and confirmed seating arrangements, her mind drifted to Elon. His face. His voice. How even when he spoke, it felt like he was saying something without saying anything at all. The more she thought about him, the more questions swirled in her mind. Why had he been so calm? Why hadn't he used his fame or influence to get on the plane? Was he truly just a billionaire looking for a quiet flight, or was there something deeper at play? By the time she finished her shift, she was mentally exhausted. Her colleagues were joking about the day's events, but Jenna couldn't join in. To them, it was just another routine, busy day at the airport. To her, it felt like everything had shifted. As the day wound down, Jenna walked out of the terminal, the bright lights of the city evening illuminating her path. She made her way to the parking lot, trying to shake off the feeling that something big had just passed her by. But as much as she tried to let it go, her phone buzzed in her pocket. It was a notification. She pulled it out and saw a news headline flash across her screen: Elon Musk reports delayed flight amidst critical business deal, praises flight attendant for professionalism. Jenna froze, her heart racing. The article explained that Musk had indeed been on the flight and had nearly missed it due to a delay on his end. The headline continued, detailing how, after his frustration with the situation, he had been impressed by a flight attendant's professionalism when she refused to bend the rules to accommodate him. Her stomach dropped. She wasn't just part of some random incident. She was a part of the story now. Elon Musk, the billionaire who had a hand in shaping the future of technology, had publicly praised her actions. The article mentioned her name, and her phone buzzed again. A message from her mom. Saw you on the news. Is this the Jenna Walker I raised? Are you famous now? Jenna blinked and felt a flush spread across her cheeks. Her mind raced. Famous? She wasn't sure about that. She was still just a flight attendant. She hadn't done anything extraordinary. She had just done her job. But the article didn't feel like it was over. She scrolled further down, reading about how Musk's business deal was crucial, something involving several high-stakes negotiations that could change the course of global tech. He had been in a rush and had been on that plane to attend a meeting across the country, an important one. Apparently, his flight was crucial to ensuring the success of the deal. And yet, he didn't demand special treatment. He didn't push for priority seating. Instead, he waited patiently, and when he boarded, he didn't complain. He even thanked the flight attendant. She hadn't realized it at the time, but by sticking to the rules, she had inadvertently become part of something much larger. Elon Musk's schedule, his business, even the fate of a huge deal, had all hinged on a flight. And there she had been, following protocol, just another gate agent doing her job. Only now, she was being recognized for it. As the days passed, Jenna's life seemed to be on a slow, creeping spiral towards something she couldn't predict. The news about her and Elon Musk went viral. Social media buzzed with theories and speculation about the flight. Some people were calling her a hero, others were calling her an obstacle to Musk's success, and there were countless opinions about what her refusal to let him board meant. Was she standing up for the rules, or was she foolishly jeopardizing something larger than herself? Jenna couldn't even walk into her local coffee shop without someone commenting on the news. They'd recognize her from the story, whispering to one another or giving her knowing smiles. At first, she tried to ignore it, but soon, the weight of their curiosity became too much to bear. "Excuse me," a woman at the counter said one morning. "You're the flight attendant from the news, right? The one who didn't let Elon Musk on the plane?" Jenna smiled politely, though it felt forced. "Yes, that's me." The woman's eyes widened. "That's amazing. I read about that. You must have known who he was, right?" Jenna shook her head. "No. I had no idea until after the fact." "You didn't let him on the flight? And then he praised you for being professional? That's incredible. How does it feel to be known by everyone?" Jenna didn't know how to answer. It wasn't like she had intentionally set out to do anything remarkable. She'd just done her job. But to the world, it looked different. People were talking about her like she had done something extraordinary, when in reality, she was just doing what she believed was right. But what was right? The praise from Musk, the way he had handled everything with such grace, did that mean she had made the wrong decision? Was she supposed to bend the rules for someone like him? The more she thought about it, the more conflicted she felt. Her phone buzzed again, another notification, this time from an unknown number. It was a message from an unlisted account, but it had an official tone. "Ms. Walker, I represent a private interest related to Mr. Musk's business ventures. He would like to meet with you for a brief discussion. Your actions on the flight have garnered his attention, and he believes there may be more to your story. If you're interested, please respond." Jenna stared at the screen, the weight of the message sinking in. What did this mean? Why would Elon Musk want to meet with her? Was it simply to thank her again? Or was there something deeper at play? Jenna stood there, her hands still gripping the edge of the counter, feeling both overwhelmed and stunned. The weight of Elon Musk's words settled into her mind, and for a moment, she forgot where she was. This was a moment of truth. Everything she had just experienced, the tension, the confusion, the doubts, suddenly made sense. Elon Musk wasn't just some billionaire. He was someone who understood the importance of principles. Rules mattered, but people mattered more. He wasn't looking for a shortcut, he wasn't trying to leverage his fame or wealth to get ahead. He had simply wanted to get on his flight. And yet, he also respected the importance of following procedures, even when it seemed like the world was telling him he didn't need to. She watched him walk down the jet bridge, the sound of his footsteps echoing in the quiet terminal. The new boarding pass in his hand was a symbol of both his patience and his quiet power. Jenna couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more to this encounter. Something she still didn't fully understand. As the door to the jet bridge closed behind Elon, Roger, the gate supervisor, exhaled loudly. "Well, that was an ordeal. We've got to be more careful next time, Jenna. You know how these things can go. But you did good. You didn't let the pressure get to you." Jenna didn't respond immediately. She felt a mixture of pride and unease. She had done her job, but something about the whole situation felt like it wasn't finished yet. She wasn't sure what she was supposed to feel, but she knew this was far from over. Her thoughts were interrupted by a soft buzzing sound. She reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone, blinking as she saw the message that had just come through. It was another notification from a news outlet. This time, the headline made her stomach tighten: "Elon Musk's flight nearly grounded, praise for gate agent who stood firm." The article recounted the events of the day in detail, focusing on how Jenna had stood firm in her decision to deny Elon boarding despite the chaotic circumstances. The piece even highlighted how Musk had publicly praised her professionalism afterward. For some, the headline was an inspiration, a reminder that rules should never be bent, no matter the situation. but for others, it was a controversial take on customer service. It made Jenna wonder, had she done the right thing? Before she could read further, a new message appeared. It was from an unfamiliar number. "Hello, Ms. Walker. This is Jonathan Reeves from SpaceX. I'm reaching out on behalf of Mr. Musk. He would like to personally meet with you tomorrow to discuss your actions today. Please let us know if you're available." Jenna's pulse quickened. This couldn't be real, could it? Elon Musk wanted to meet with her? Why? What was going on? The next morning, Jenna found herself pacing nervously in her apartment, the message from Jonathan Reeves still on her phone. She had tried to ignore it at first, convinced it was some sort of prank. But after confirming the number and reading through her emails, it became clear that this was legitimate. Elon Musk, the very same man she had refused to board the previous day, wanted to meet with her. Jenna was overwhelmed by the whirlwind of emotions inside her. She had just been doing her job, right? She had followed the rules, remained calm under pressure, and stuck to her principles. And now she was being contacted by one of the most influential people in the world. She couldn't help but wonder, was this an opportunity? Or was it just a way for Musk to ensure no more mistakes were made in the future? A few hours later, she stood in the lobby of a sleek building downtown. The glass walls let in the bright sunlight, and the city buzzed around her in a blur. A receptionist led her to an elevator and pressed the button for the top floor. Jenna couldn't help but feel small in this world of opulence, but she also knew this meeting could be the moment that changed everything. She had no idea what Elon Musk wanted to talk to her about, but she was certain it would be important. As the elevator doors opened, Jenna stepped into an expansive office that overlooked the entire city. It was minimalist in design, with clean lines, bright lighting, and an aura of quiet power. Elon Musk stood by a large window, his back to her. He didn't turn as she entered, but the receptionist gave a polite nod before leaving them alone. "Ms. Walker," Elon said, his voice calm and collected, yet there was something more to it. He turned to face her, and for the first time since the airport, Jenna saw him up close, his intense gaze fixed on her. "I appreciate you coming here." Jenna nodded, unsure of what to say. "I'm not sure what this is about, Mr. Musk." He smiled slightly, a knowing look in his eyes. "I'm sure you're wondering why I wanted to meet with you. It's simple, really. Yesterday, you did something that not many people would have done. You followed the rules, even when it was inconvenient." Jenna's thoughts raced. She didn't expect this kind of acknowledgement. "I was just doing my job," she said quietly. Musk walked over to a sleek chair and gestured for her to sit. "That's exactly it. You were doing your job. Most people would have let me board, especially when I explained who I was. But you didn't. You followed the rules, no matter who was in front of you." Jenna sat down, her mind whirling. "But, you're Elon Musk. I didn't know who you were at the time." "I know," he said with a smile. "And that's exactly why I wanted to meet with you. Most people, when they realize who I am, they change their behavior. They become either overly eager to help or they go out of their way to accommodate me. But you didn't do that. You treated me like any other passenger. That's something rare and valuable." Jenna felt her cheeks flush. "I just thought it was important to stick to the process. Everyone else should be treated equally." Musk leaned back in his chair, considering her words. "And that's why I respect what you did. In a world where everyone's trying to get ahead by bending the rules, you did the right thing, even when it was difficult. And that's the kind of mindset I want on my team." Jenna blinked, trying to process his words. "Your team?" "Yes," he said, his tone shifting slightly. "I'm always on the lookout for people who think outside the box. People who don't just follow orders but believe in doing what's right. That's why I'm offering you an opportunity. A chance to join one of my companies. SpaceX. Or Tesla. Maybe even both. Jenna's jaw dropped. Wait, you're offering me a job? Just because I did my job. Musk nodded. Not just because you did your job, Jenna. It's because you did it in a way that most people don't. You showed integrity, and you stuck to your principles. That's what matters. Jenna was speechless. She had come here thinking that she might just get a simple thank you. Instead, she was being offered an opportunity that most people could only dream of. But, why me? She asked, still trying to wrap her head around what was happening. Why did you choose me? Musk smiled again, a hint of warmth in his eyes. Because you're different. In a world of shortcuts, you didn't take one. And that's something I believe in. You might not realize it yet, but you've just proven that you have the potential to be part of something much bigger. Something that could change the world. Jenna sat back in her chair, her mind reeling. She had come here as a flight attendant, someone who simply followed the rules. But now, it seemed that those rules had led her to something far greater than she could have imagined. Something that could alter the course of her life forever. Jenna sat there in stunned silence, her mind racing. She had only expected to do what was expected: keep her head down, follow the rules, and do her job. But this was far beyond anything she had ever imagined. Elon Musk, the man who had revolutionized industries, who was known for pushing the boundaries of what was possible, was sitting across from her offering a job. But not just any job. This wasn't about being a part of his team in the usual sense. This was about something bigger, an opportunity that could change the course of her entire life. You seem surprised, Musk said with a slight chuckle, breaking the silence. Surprised? Jenna let out a small laugh, though it felt more like a breath of disbelief escaping her lips. She cleared her throat. I'm more than surprised. I don't even know what to say. You don't need to say anything yet, Musk replied, his tone calm, almost encouraging. You've already said enough with your actions. When you chose to follow the rules, when you stuck to your principles even when the situation got tense, that told me everything I needed to know about you. There aren't many people who would do that, especially when faced with someone like me. Jenna swallowed hard, trying to steady her racing heart. But I don't understand. Why would you want someone like me? I'm just a flight attendant. My whole career is about making sure passengers are comfortable and following procedures. I'm not. I don't have the experience you'd expect for something like this. Musk leaned forward, his gaze steady but intense. That's exactly why I'm offering this to you. Experience is important, sure, but integrity? That's something that can't be taught. You showed that you could stand your ground, that you could make tough decisions even under pressure. That's something I value more than experience. In this world, too many people are willing to compromise their principles to get ahead, and I can't afford to have people like that in my companies. Jenna's mind was spinning. Was he serious? She had always admired Musk's companies from afar: SpaceX, Tesla, Neuralink. What he had accomplished was incredible. The idea that she could be a part of something like that felt like a dream. But I'm not qualified, she said, her voice trembling slightly. I've never worked in tech or business. How could I possibly contribute to a company like SpaceX or Tesla? Musk's smile softened, and he shook his head slightly. It's not about qualifications in the traditional sense. It's about mindset. I don't need someone who knows the ins and outs of rockets or electric cars, at least not yet. I need someone who can think critically, who can lead with integrity, and who isn't afraid to challenge the status quo. That's why I'm offering you the chance to prove yourself. It's about potential, Jenna. You've got that in spades. The room felt oddly quiet as Musk's words sank in. Jenna could barely believe what she was hearing. Her entire life had been a series of small, predictable steps, gradually working her way through the ranks of the airline industry, trying to do her job well, trying to make a living. She had never considered herself anything special. She was just a flight attendant, part of the team that made sure the flights went smoothly. She followed the rules, did what she was told, and kept things running without drawing too much attention to herself. And now, she was sitting in front of one of the most powerful people in the world, being offered an opportunity that most people would kill for. "I don't know what to say," she whispered, her voice barely audible as she tried to process everything Musk had just told her. "You don't have to say anything," Musk replied. "But think about it. This could be the start of something incredible for you. Not just in terms of your career, but for your personal growth as well. Being a part of something like SpaceX or Tesla means being at the forefront of innovation. It means challenging yourself every single day. It means being part of a team that's changing the world." Jenna's eyes flicked to the window behind Musk, looking out at the skyline of the city. The enormity of what he was offering hit her like a wave. Could she really do this? Could she take this leap into a world she knew so little about? She wasn't sure. She was scared. But deep down, she also knew that this was a chance that came once in a lifetime. What would it involve? She asked, her voice shaking slightly as she tried to keep the conversation going, to keep her mind focused on the reality of what Musk was offering. Musk leaned back in his chair, his eyes glinting with thought. "It would involve starting small, of course. You wouldn't be thrown into the deep end. But we would give you opportunities to learn, to grow, to contribute. It's about finding where you belong within the company. Maybe you'll start in operations, maybe you'll end up in a leadership role. The important thing is that you'll be challenged, and you'll be part of something meaningful." Jenna felt her breath catch in her throat. This was real. It wasn't just a fleeting thought or an impossible dream. It was happening. She was being offered a chance to change everything. She stopped, her voice faltering. "I need some time to think about it. This is a huge decision, and I don't want to rush into it." Musk nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Of course. Take all the time you need. But remember, opportunities like this don't come often. The decision is yours, but whatever you choose, know that I respect the choice you make." The weight of the moment settled over her as she stood up to leave. Elon Musk was offering her a seat at the table. A seat in a world she had never imagined she would enter. She wasn't sure if she was ready. But she knew that, no matter what, this moment would stay with her forever. As she stepped back into the elevator, Jenna felt her heart pounding in her chest. Her thoughts were a whirl of excitement and confusion. She had always believed in doing the right thing, sticking to her principles, and standing firm. But could she really make this leap? Could she leave behind everything she knew to chase something as monumental as this? The elevator doors closed, and the city skyline blurred as she descended back to reality. But one thing was clear. She had already made a decision, even if she hadn't fully realized it yet. The world had just changed for Jenna Walker. As the plane ascended, the hum of the engines mixed with Jenna's swirling thoughts. The clouds outside the window seemed to drift lazily by, unaware of the chaos inside her mind. Jenna couldn't stop thinking about everything that had unfolded over the past few hours. It had been a normal shift, just another day at the airport, until it suddenly wasn't. Elon Musk. She had to remind herself of who he was, even as the image of him, so casually waiting at the gate, kept flashing through her mind. The man who had reshaped industries. The man who had taken humanity's future into his hands with SpaceX, revolutionized the car industry with Tesla, and now, in that brief moment, had become a part of her own life story. It was surreal, almost unbelievable. But more than anything, what stood out to Jenna wasn't Musk's wealth or fame. It was his response. Most people, when they had that kind of power, expected the world to bend to their will. Yet Musk had chosen to wait. He hadn't demanded to board early or expected to skip the line. He had followed the rules just like everyone else. It struck Jenna deeply. People had judged him before he even opened his mouth. She had assumed, just like everyone else, that he was just another entitled passenger, trying to use his status to get ahead. But when it mattered, he had stood his ground, calmly, and waited. There had been no tantrums, no threats. Just a quiet determination. Her thoughts were interrupted as the flight began its descent. She could see the city's skyline now, approaching rapidly. As the aircraft dipped lower, the weight of what had happened and what was yet to come settled over her. There had been a certain irony to it all. Here she was, a flight attendant, trained to uphold policies and ensure that passengers adhered to rules. Yet, in the end, it had been the rule breaker who had respected her position. In return, she had done her job no more, no less. And it had made all the difference. The landing gear thudded into place, and the plane touched down smoothly on the tarmac. Jenna breathed a sigh of relief. It was over. But as the passengers disembarked, something strange lingered in her chest, a sense of resolve, and something else too, something unfamiliar, a sense of pride. When she stepped off the plane, the gate area was buzzing with the usual post-flight chaos. People shuffled past her, eager to collect their belongings and move on. But Jenna couldn't ignore the nagging thought that kept creeping into her mind. She had done what was right. She had held firm to the rules, and in doing so, had earned the respect of someone who could have easily bypassed her. The truth was, the entire situation had changed her. As she made her way toward the crew room, the gate supervisor approached her, his eyes wide. "Jenna, I don't know how to thank you," he said, his voice low but full of gratitude. "I've been thinking about what happened with Musk. You handled that so well. And look what came out of it. You didn't back down, even though you had no idea who he was. That's incredible." Jenna didn't know how to respond. The events of the day felt like a blur now. "I just did my job," she said, shrugging slightly, feeling the weight of the moment. "I didn't know who he was at the time, but I had to follow the rules. That's what I'm here for." The supervisor nodded. "That's exactly it. You did more than just your job, Jenna. You showed integrity. And that's something we all need to be reminded of from time to time." Jenna offered a small smile. She appreciated the compliment, but deep down, she still couldn't fully grasp the significance of what had just happened. Yes, she had done her job, but was it really as simple as that? She found herself walking through the airport, almost in a daze. The sounds of the terminal, people calling out to loved ones, the rush of carts being pushed down the hallway felt distant, as though she were in a different world altogether. She hadn't realized it before, but there was a quiet power in simply doing what was right. In upholding the rules, even when faced with someone who could easily shatter them. Jenna's phone buzzed in her pocket, breaking the silence in her mind. She pulled it out, expecting a message from her friend or perhaps an update about her next flight. But what she saw on the screen took her by surprise. It was an email. From SpaceX. Her heart skipped a beat. She had forgotten about the conversation with Musk earlier. She had thought it was just a passing moment, a brief interaction with someone who, in the grand scheme of things, had far more important matters to attend to than her. But here it was. The email subject read, "Opportunity awaits, SpaceX." Jenna clicked it open, her hands trembling slightly. Subject, "Opportunity awaits, SpaceX." Dear Jenna. It was a pleasure meeting you earlier today. I wanted to take the time to personally reach out and follow up on our conversation. As discussed, we're always on the lookout for individuals who stand by their principles and demonstrate resilience under pressure. Your actions today showed exactly that. While many would have let the pressure of the situation cause them to fold, you held your ground, and for that, I have great respect. I'd like to offer you the chance to join the SpaceX team. While this is a big leap from your current role, I believe that with your determination and ability to make tough calls, you could do incredible things here. Please let me know if you're open to further discussions. Sincerely, Elon Musk, CEO, SpaceX. Jenna sat down abruptly on a nearby bench, her mind racing. The words on the screen were both clear and surreal. SpaceX. She had been offered a position. Not just a job. A career. The possibility of becoming part of something that could change the world. Her heart pounded in her chest as the weight of the decision hit her. She had been faced with a choice that day between sticking to her principles or bending the rules. And now, that choice had led her to this. She wasn't sure what would come next, but one thing was certain, she had earned this opportunity. It hadn't come from luck or chance. It had come from doing what was right. She wasn't just a flight attendant anymore. She had proven her worth, and now, the world was opening up to her in ways she had never imagined. As she stared at the email, a deep sense of pride washed over her. This wasn't just about being offered a job. This was about a chance to prove to herself and to the world that sometimes, the right decision makes all the difference. The phone buzzed again, and she glanced at the screen. It was a message from the gate supervisor. Jenna, I heard about your offer. I knew you had it in you. Don't forget where you started. Jenna smiled to herself, feeling a wave of gratitude. She had started as just another flight attendant. But now, she was about to embark on a new journey. A journey that would test her, challenge her, and ultimately change her forever. And for the first time in a long while, Jenna felt ready. Ready for whatever came next. As the days passed, Jenna couldn't shake the feeling that her life had changed in a way she hadn't expected. When she first stepped into that airport, her only goal was to ensure that everything went smoothly. She had no idea that a simple encounter with a seemingly ordinary passenger would lead her to such an extraordinary opportunity. But sometimes, life has a way of throwing lessons your way when you least expect it. In the days following the flight, Jenna found herself reflecting on everything that had happened: the encounter with Elon Musk, the way he had calmly waited, and the lessons she'd learned from him. The more she thought about it, the more she realized how important perspective was. Yes, rules mattered. She had always known that. But there was something even deeper to consider: the way we view people, the way we judge others based on assumptions, and how often we miss the bigger picture. Jenna had been just as guilty of judging. She had assumed that Elon Musk was another entitled, arrogant passenger who thought the rules didn't apply to him. But she hadn't taken the time to really see him. She hadn't considered that maybe, just maybe, he wasn't as he appeared. She hadn't thought about the possibility that he, like everyone else, had to follow the same rules. That day, she learned a lesson she would carry with her forever: appearances could be deceiving. Elon Musk didn't flaunt his fame or his power. Instead, he had respected the process. When he could have easily demanded special treatment, he chose to wait, just like everyone else. He didn't raise his voice or complain. He understood the importance of rules and the value of patience. And in doing so, he had shown Jenna something she hadn't expected: that humility and respect could take you farther than any privilege or position ever could. As the weeks went on, Jenna couldn't help but notice how her perspective on life had shifted. She had always been proud of the work she did, proud of the way she followed procedures, but now she saw it in a new light. Every person who stepped through the doors of the airport was unique, with their own story, their own challenges, and their own perspective. What if, instead of making assumptions about them, she took a moment to see things from their point of view? It wasn't easy, of course. Jenna still faced moments where she had to stand her ground, times when passengers tried to bend the rules or push the limits. But now, every encounter felt different. She found herself more patient, more understanding, and more empathetic. She had learned that the simple act of respecting the process was just as important as enforcing it. But even more importantly, she had learned to see people not just as passengers to be dealt with, but as individuals who deserved the same respect that she herself expected. One evening, Jenna was sitting in the break room after a particularly long shift. She had just finished processing a group of unruly passengers and was feeling the weight of the day. But as she sat there, a thought crossed her mind. She remembered Elon Musk's words, his quiet compliment, his reminder to never lose the ability to stand firm in the face of pressure. It was a lesson that had stayed with her. In a way, it had shaped how she approached everything from that point forward. She had always done her job well, but now she did it with a new sense of purpose. She realized that by sticking to her principles, by respecting others and the rules, she could make a real difference. It wasn't always easy, and there would be days when things didn't go as planned. But what mattered was that she had the strength to keep going, to stay true to what she believed in, no matter who was watching or how much pressure was placed on her. Jenna's life had become more than just about enforcing rules. It was about making people feel respected, seen, and heard. She understood now that everyone was fighting their own battles, dealing with their own struggles. A passenger who seemed rude or impatient might be dealing with stress in their personal life. A passenger who was angry might just be scared or anxious about flying. She had learned not to judge them based on the surface. And that was the biggest lesson she had learned from that day with Elon Musk. It wasn't about his wealth, his fame, or his influence. It was about how he had treated her. With respect. With humility. Despite being one of the most powerful men in the world, he had acted like any other person trying to get on a plane. He hadn't demanded anything special. He hadn't expected to be treated differently. He had shown her that humility was not a weakness but a strength, that treating others with respect, no matter who they were, was the true measure of a person's character. As Jenna looked around the break room, she realized how different everything felt now. She wasn't just a flight attendant anymore. She was someone who had seen the world through a new lens, someone who had learned that it wasn't enough to follow the rules. She had to do it with kindness, with understanding, and with a sense of respect for everyone she encountered. That night, as Jenna walked out of the airport to her car, she felt something inside her that she hadn't felt before: peace. She had found her place in the world, not by following a strict set of rules, but by embracing the deeper lessons that life had taught her. It was about perspective. It was about seeing people for who they really were. It was about respecting the process, but also respecting the people involved. Jenna smiled to herself as she got in her car and started the engine. Life had a way of surprising her, she realized. Sometimes, the most important lessons came when she least expected them. And the truth was, every encounter had the potential to teach her something new. It was up to her to stay open, to be willing to learn, and to let those lessons shape her into the person she wanted to be. The journey wasn't over. It was only just beginning. Jenna knew that as she moved forward, she would carry the lessons of that day with her. She would remember Elon Musk's quiet respect and how it had affected her. And in the future, she would strive to be the kind of person who saw beyond the surface, who didn't judge by appearances, and who treated others with the same respect and humility that she had learned to embrace. Sometimes, the most important lessons in life came in the most unexpected forms. Jenna had learned that to truly rise above, you had to look beyond what you saw on the surface, and recognize the power in kindness, humility, and respect. Those were the qualities that mattered, the ones that would carry her forward in every aspect of her life. And as she drove off into the night, she knew that her journey wasn't just about following rules. It was about making the world a better place, one respectful encounter at a time. And that, Jenna realized, was the most important lesson of all. As the road stretched ahead, she couldn't help but feel a sense of anticipation for what lay ahead, knowing that she was ready for whatever came her way.